Hello there, and welcome to the Outside Views weekly magazine on European Union politics. The Commission proposed on Friday to strengthen the resilience of the EU's critical infrastructure. The proposal for a Council recommendation builds on the five-point plan for resilient critical infrastructure presented by President von der Leyen to the European Parliament on October 5th. Europe's critical facilities are more interconnected and interdependent, making them stronger and more efficient, but also more vulnerable in the event of a security incident. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine has brought new risks, physical attacks and cyber attacks often combined as a hybrid threat. The sabotage of the Nord Stream gas pipelines and other recent security incidents have highlighted the threat to the resilience of the EU's critical infrastructure. The EU's ability to protect itself against attacks on critical infrastructure, both within the EU itself and in its immediate vicinity, needs to be strengthened as a matter of urgency. As a key element of the EU's work to build a security union, the Commission proposed updated rules to strengthen the resilience of critical facilities back in 2020. With the recently agreed Resilience of Critical Facilities or CER directive and the revised Network and Information System Security NIS2, the EU will soon have an updated and comprehensive legal framework to address both physical and strengthen the cyber resilience of critical infrastructure. However, in view of the rapidly changing threat landscape, the application of the new regulations must be accelerated. The draft recommendation aims to maximize and accelerate work to protect critical infrastructure in three priority areas: preparedness, responsiveness, and international cooperation. To this end, it foresees a stronger support and coordination role for the Commission to improve preparedness and response to current threats, as well as enhanced cooperation between member states and with neighboring third countries. Priority should be given to the key areas of energy, digital infrastructure, transport, and space. The EU has a specific role in relation to infrastructure that crosses borders or provides cross-border services, and thus affects the interests of several member states. It is in the interest of all member states to clearly identify this infrastructure and the entities operating it and to have a collective commitment to protect it. The Commission calls on member states to subject entities operating critical infrastructure to stress tests based on common principles developed at Union level. The draft recommendations aims to strengthen the early warning and reaction capability in the event of disruptions to critical infrastructure as part of the Union's civil protection mechanism. The Commission will regularly review the adequacy and readiness of existing response capacities and organize tests for cross-sectoral cooperation at EU level. And the European Commission has adopted a communication on enforcement of EU law, setting out how it makes sure that EU law is respected and that citizens and businesses can enjoy the same rights across Europe. Thanks to the correct application of EU law, it's possible to breathe cleaner air, travel and work freely across the EU, or be reimbursed for healthcare received abroad. EU law has a tangible impact on the everyday life of people in Europe. That is why enforcing EU law is one of the Commission's top priorities. The Commission's efforts to promote compliance start at an early stage when EU law is being drafted and adopted. The Commission has developed a range of measures to help member states, including practical guidance, funding, and monitoring, to prevent breaches of EU law from happening in the first place. At the same time, where EU law is breached, the Commission does not hesitate to take legal action and launch infringement procedures. In recent years, the Commission has launched landmark processes to protect core values: equality, justice, and citizenship. The notification contains the following points: cooperation with member states, monitoring and early detection of violations of EU law, intelligent enforcement and prevention of violations from the start, strategic enforcement and pre-infringement procedures, tackling breaches of EU law through court proceedings, and rapid and effective responses to crises. They took a lot of time in the past. I hope they get faster now. Enforcing EU law is not a one-off event, but requires continuous and sustained efforts by member states and the Commission to promote the consistent and effective application of EU rules. A stock-taking exercise is currently taking place in the Commission, together with member states, to ensure that the best possible enforcement tools are in place to make EU law work in practice. Particular attention is paid to better monitoring of the correct application of regulations and even greater transparency in enforcement actions. The Commission will report on the results in 2023. And the Russian army continues to destroy civilian infrastructure in Ukraine. That is why the European Commission is launching a new program for the country to provide emergency shelter and winter equipment. There is also an additional 175 million euros in humanitarian aid to help those most in need in Ukraine and Moldova. EU humanitarian assistance this winter will include the rescEU Strategic Reserve will be mobilized to hold a reserve of emergency shelter and supplies in Ukraine worth a total of 62.3 million euros. Together with a second reserve of emergency shelters in Romania, this gives the EU the capacity to provide emergency shelter for up to 46,000 people. A further 175 million euros is earmarked for humanitarian aid to the most vulnerable people in Ukraine. Of this, 150 million is earmarked for actions in Ukraine and 25 million for actions in Moldova. Winterproof accommodation has top priority in view of the sub-zero temperatures to be expected. Other priorities are education in emergencies, health, and help for the vulnerable. These new funds bring the total amount of EU humanitarian aid mobilized as a result of the Russian war in Ukraine to over 500 million euros. The European Commission and Ukraine are also working to prepare Ukraine's future participation in the EU Civil Protection Mechanism. The mechanism has already been fully activated to support Ukraine with more than 70,000 tons of life-saving supplies from 31 European countries. And the European Commission has adopted a revised communication on state aid for research, development and innovation, the so-called RDI Framework 2022, which sets out the rules to be followed by member states when granting state aid to companies and their RDI activities, for example, with a view to maintaining fair competitive conditions. The RDI Framework 2022, which contributes to the EU strategic goals related to the green and digital transitions, entered into force this week. Executive Vice President Margrethe Vestager, responsible for competition policy, said about this, "The revised state aid framework adopted this week will make it easier for member states to support research, development and innovation, including by small and medium-sized enterprises, while ensuring they do so that any distortions of competition are kept to a minimum. The targeted changes to the rules will support Europe's green and digital transition by facilitating public-private investment in breakthrough innovation and research and testing and experimentation infrastructure." And the Commission this week disbursed a first tranche of 5 billion euros of extraordinary macro-financial assistance, namely 2 billion to Ukraine. This assistance is part of an MFA package worth up to 9 billion, announced by the Commission in its 18 May communication on Ukraine's relief and reconstruction, and endorsed by the June Council, I think it was. This is part of the extraordinary effort the EU is making together with the international community to help Ukraine meet its immediate financial needs following Russia's unprovoked and unjustified attack. The Commission already paid out the first part of this extraordinary MFA package of a 1 billion euros, and on 1 and 2, that was in August 22. This was preceded by a 1.2 billion emergency macro-financial assistance loan to Ukraine in the first half of the year. With this payment, MFA support disbursed to Ukraine since the Russian attack on February 24th totals 4.2 billion. The funds will be made available to Ukraine in the form of particularly cheap loans with longer maturities than is usual with macro-financial assistance. They promote macroeconomic stability and the country's overall resilience in the face of Russia's military onslaught and the resulting economic challenges. As a further expression of solidarity, the interest cost of this loan will be covered by the EU budget for the first time, at least for the duration of the current multi-annual financial framework. As with all previous macro-financial assistance loans, the Commission will raise funds on the international capital markets and on-lend the proceeds to Ukraine on identical terms. This 2 billion euros loan is 70% covered by funds from the EU budget and national guarantees from member states. And this payment was made after Ukraine complied with its reporting obligations under the Memorandum of Understanding with the Commission. This agreement aims to ensure that the funds are used efficiently, transparently, and verifiably. Before making any further payments, Ukraine needs to demonstrate that it has made satisfactory progress towards policies related to economic resilience and stability, governance, the rule of law, and energy. These political conditions were laid down in the agreement concluded with Ukraine and, in view of Russia's current war against Ukraine, are seen as achievable and relevant also with regard to the country's future reconstruction. This financial assistance complements the EU's unprecedented support to date, notably humanitarian assistance I mentioned earlier, development and defense assistance, the one-year suspension of all import tariffs on Ukrainian exports, as well as other solidarity initiatives, including to remove transport bottlenecks in order to secure export, particularly grain. And the other tranches of this 5 billion euro package are to be paid out quickly before the end of the year. In addition, work is ongoing on the remaining 3 billion of the exceptional macro-financial assistance package, totaling up to 9 billion, in parallel with work on a more strategic and predictable focus on EU financial support to Ukraine in 2023. And the Commission adopted its work program for 2023 this week. The program sets out an ambitious agenda to respond to the current crises affecting the daily lives of Europeans while driving the ongoing green and digital transformation and making our European Union more resilient. In this sense, the Commission aims to support people and companies, be it by lowering energy prices, ensuring industrial competitiveness and food security, which are so important for our supply, or by strengthening our social market economy. This Commission work program contains 43 new policy initiatives across all 6 overarching objectives of Commission President von der Leyen's political guidelines and builds on her 2022 State of the Union address and the Memorandum of Understanding. Many of the key initiatives in this work program also follow on from the outcomes of the Conference on the Future of Europe. In addition, the new generation of citizens' forums will be part of the Commission's policy making in certain key areas. The first citizens' forums will deal with the topics of food waste, learning mobility, and virtual worlds. It is about the implementation of 6 overarching goals, as I said. First, it's the European Green Deal. Second is a Europe for the digital age. Third is an economy at the service of the people. Fourth is a stronger Europe in the world. Fifth is promoting our European way of life. And sixth is new impetus for democracy in Europe. The Commission will start discussions with the Parliament and the Council to establish a list of common legislative priorities on which the co-legislators want swift action to be taken. The Commission will continue to work with and support Member States to ensure the implementation of new and existing EU policies and rules, and will not hesitate to enforce EU law through infringement procedures when necessary. And the European Green Deal and the Repower EU plan require a profound transformation of our energy system, which needs to become more interactive and intelligent so that consumers can reap the benefits of the green transition. The Commission this week presented an action plan setting out how new technologies can help improve the efficient use of energy resources, make it easier to connect renewable energy to the grid, and cut costs for EU consumers and energy companies. The Commission presented measures to increase data sharing, boost investment in electricity infrastructure, ensure consumer benefits, and strengthen cybersecurity. As data centers and growing demand for online services demand more and more resources from our energy system, this week's plan also outlined ways to decouple the ICT industry's energy footprint from exponentially increasing data volumes. Ecological and digital change must go hand in hand. In some areas of the energy sector, such as electric vehicles, photovoltaic systems, and heat pumps, digital and intelligent technologies are already available, and their expansion must be supported. In other areas of the energy system, we are only just beginning to take advantage of digitization. In the coming months and years, the Commission intends to take several steps to promote digital energy services while ensuring an energy-efficient ICT sector. And that will include, first, helping consumers to better control their energy consumption and bills through new digital tools and services, also thanks to a solid governance framework for a common European energy data space. Secondly, control of the energy consumption of the ICT sector, including through an eco-labeling system for data centers, an energy label for computers, measures to increase transparency on the energy consumption of telecommunication services, and an energy efficiency label for blockchains. And thirdly, strengthening the cybersecurity of energy networks through new legislation, including a network code on cybersecurity aspects of cross-border electricity flows under the EU electricity regulation and Council recommendation on strengthening the resilience of critical infrastructure I mentioned in the beginning of the video. Through the Digital Europe program, the LIFE program, the Cohesion Fund, and a flagship program for digitization of energy under Horizon Europe, the Commission will continue to financially support research and innovation and boost the uptake of digital technologies in the energy sector. In collaboration with the European Green Digital Coalition, they will continue to develop tools and methodologies to measure the net environmental and climate impacts of digital enabling technologies in the energy sector. And the European Union and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, signed a comprehensive aviation agreement this week that will open up more opportunities for air travel and improve direct connectivity between the two regions, while laying down modern regulations and standards for the flights concerned. The agreement comes into effect immediately. This agreement is the latest example of a new generation of international aviation agreements that set global benchmarks that commit all 37 countries in both regions to compete fairly and improve social and environmental conditions. The signing opens up new opportunities for consumers, airlines, and airports in both Europe and ASEAN. ASEAN is a global economic powerhouse with a rapidly growing aviation market. In 2019, it was the 9th largest freight market and ranked 16th for passenger traffic with more than 8 million travelers. The introduction of a modern framework for air services between Europe and Asia, which creates opportunities while ensuring high standards, is therefore an investment in the future. The agreement creates a level playing field and should bring new air traffic opportunities and economic advantages for both sides. It replaces more than 140 bilateral air transport agreements with a uniform set of rules, thus reducing the administrative burden. The EU member states that have not yet concluded any bilateral agreements with ASEAN states can now also benefit from this modern legal framework. All EU airlines will be able to operate direct flights from any airport in the EU to any airport in ASEAN, and vice versa for ASEAN airlines. This will facilitate competition for EU and ASEAN airlines in the lucrative EU-ASEAN market. Air carriers will be able to fly to up to 14 weekly passenger flights departing from or arriving in an EU member state, and any number of cargo flights between the two regions and beyond to third countries, with the so-called fifth freedom traffic rights. The agreement contains modern and fair competition provisions to eliminate market distortions. Both sides also recognize the importance of environmental and social issues and agreed to cooperate on these issues and improve their respective social and labor laws. In 2016, the Commission was authorized by the Council to negotiate an air transport agreement with ASEAN at EU level. The negotiations were concluded in June 2021. The EU has signed similar comprehensive aviation agreements with other partner countries, namely the United States, Canada, the Western Balkans, Morocco, Georgia, Jordan, Moldova, Israel, Ukraine, and Armenia. The application of the agreement began with a signature. In the next step, the contradicting parties will initiate the ratification process in accordance with their respective procedures in order to bring the agreement into force. And so you see, a lot happens just within 1 week in the EU, and the EU is not just a bureaucratic monster. It is doing a lot of work for the member states and to make life easier for the people being part of the EU. And I hope you liked the weekly magazine, and I will see you again next week. But of course, in the meantime, just visit one of my other channels. All the times and links are in the description under this video. I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.